Oh, hello everybody. Okay, bit of quick housekeeping. So far, as you know, we've had odd and even numbered lessons. That ends today. This is lesson 38, which should have been one of the more advanced lessons, but in fact we're closing off the fundamental section. Now there's still a lot of stuff to discuss, but by now you have enough to write a simple Yab program. You know about variables, loops, subroutines, all that very basic stuff. Pun intended. So from here we will be talking about setting up windows, views, widgets, and in the process I'll be learning a lot of stuff myself because there are many widgets that I've never had the opportunity to use. So forgive me if I struggle a bit here and there. But there's one final thing we need to discuss. Files. Because so far all our stuff has been inside the program. And sooner or later you will want to save it for the next time you use your program. And that means writing it to a hard disk and retrieving it again. And the basic command for that is open. And as you can see, open has a number of different ways to work with it. They fall into two big categories. Sequential access, one line at a time from the top, and random access. I am going to talk about sequential access today. Random access means using your file more as if it was a little piece of memory, and you poke a byte into a precise spot in that file. And for most of us, that is something we will never ever need to do. Because sequential access is slower, because maybe you want the last line and now you have to go from line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But computers are so fast these days. Who cares, really? So unless you're writing something very specific, I don't think we need to cover that. Even then, you can see there are a number of different ways to write, to open a file. And I'm simply going to show you my favorite. The first thing in a sequential file is you have to decide if you want to write or read your file. Because in a sequential file, it's one or the other. You can't do both at the same time. You can do that in random access, but that's a whole another level. There are other Yab dialects, basic dialects I mean, in which you can also append. You can open a file for append, which means it doesn't get blown away like you do when you open it for writing. Yab does not have that. Right? You either read a file or you write it. So if you want to insert a line in the middle of a file, let's say you have 6 lines. You want to have 1, 2, 3, new line, and then the rest of the file. Then you have to open it for reading. Read the first 3 lines, put them in a variable, add your new line, add the last 3 lines, and then write it all back to the file. So it's not as if you can just write anywhere in the file you want at any time. You'll have to get it from disk into memory, do whatever you wanted to do with it, and then put it back in memory again. So what are we going to do today? Well, as always, I've written a little test application. Right, this is, so first you can see I have to open, and I always use this syntax. It's just the one I'm most comfortable with, right, which is the same as these two. But if you're already familiar with some other language or some other dialect, and one of these works better for you, then yeah, well, go for it. Okay, so first we open the file and we have to give it a number. It's usually called a channel, although sometimes you see it called a stream. Don't worry about the terminology. And we call this channel 1. Now this little hash mark here is optional, right? It'll work just as well like that. I sort of like using it because my very first basic dialect required it, and I'm just used to seeing it. Then we print a literal string. This is a test, and we print it to channel 1. Then we print an empty line, and then we print a variable which I've set up before. And then I close that stream. Now you have to get really fanatical about closing your files. Right? If you need another file open, that'll be channel 2 and 3 and 4. So how many of these things can you open? Well, I did a bit of experimenting, and in 64-bit haiku, the answer seems to be 124. When I tried to open channel 125, it crashed. Now that's a very weird number. You would expect it to be 128, powers of 2 and all that, but 124 it is. So it seems that Yab itself uses up 4 channels for its own internal purposes. Whatever. But let me tell you one thing, if you have 124 files open, then you are in big trouble, and you'd better reconsider your design, because you are going to get so confused. Okay, end of sermon. Right, so here we only have one file open, and we close it. Then we reopen it again, but this time for reading. And we're going to read it back into a variable, the whole file. Right, so we know this is 3 lines, so I could just say for f equals 1 to 3. That would work. But sometimes you don't know how long your file is. So let's let the computer do the work. use a while when loop, and EOF means end of file. So while we haven't reached the end of file channel 1, let's read one line of code. Now this is a little bit weird, because from everything you've learned so far, you would expect that this would look like this. bstring equals line input channel 1. Alright? That looks reasonable, but that won't work. Right? Because, well, it comes back from the grey prehistory of BASIC, and it has to look like this. So it's the line input, then the channel, and then the variable that you want to put it into. Without the channel, it's going to ask you to type a line of text into the console. That's an alternative use for it. But the way it looks here, it's going to read from that file. Okay, and then what we do is we start up a new variable, and we say, write this thing which starts up empty, and we add whatever we got from the file from it, and we add characters 10, which is a line feed. Otherwise you're going to get one long string. Right, and we do that while the file hasn't reached the end. Then we close that file and we print this new thing that we've just created from the file. Okay, let's see if that will work. Alright. Open a terminal. And there you go. So if we look at this, there's your file that we created. This is a test, an empty line, and this is line 3. And that is exactly the way it came up. So this is how you can, for instance, create configuration files to remember what your program was doing, and next time you can start up at that exact point. If you only have one file open, then it's easy enough. 2, 3, fine. But sometimes you're deep in your program and you don't remember which files are open and which are closed. Well, there is a way around that. And that is by using this little subroutine. I didn't write it. I think BB Jimmy wrote that. Right? So you can see this uses a different way to, different syntax. Right, so you've got your local variable handle, and you use that to open a file for reading. And it returns the first stream that is open and puts it in the variable handle. It's a numeric variable. Right? Then if everything went right, then it returns yes, file exists. That's what this little thing is for. But if you returned the variable handle, then that would give you the first open file. And so instead of returning 1, you return 2, 3, anything up to 124. And so in other basic dialects, you have something called free file, right? It's a standard variable. So you would say open file name for writing as free file. We don't have that in Yab, but by you doing it like this, you can determine that the first one that's open, that's available, is number 7, whatever. So all you have to do is change this to return handle. And that's all there is to it. So if you have so many files open that you can't remember which are open and which are closed, well, first of all, I'd suggest you have another look at your design, because files shouldn't be open for too long. They really shouldn't. You know, try to work in memory and only write out to a file when you're ready. But this is one way to determine which file, which handle, which stream, which channel is available. Thanks for watching.